I'm Pat Nevin.
This is Ali Riley.
Hi, this is Ruben Loftus-Cheek, and you're listening to the London is Blue podcast.
Welcome back, Chelsea fans, to another episode of the London is Blue podcast, your home for all things Chelsea FC. Dan, Mike, Nick, and myself cover all the match reviews from the latest Chelsea matches. We cover the team news and even throw you some exclusive interviews. Thank you already for being an awesome listener, and you know what? Let's jump right in.
All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back. This is, again, part 2 of a special we did with Joe Tweeds and Sebastian Chapuis. If you haven't listened to the first one yet, go back in that feed, hit it up. But if you already have, let's jump right in. All right, well, I think that's a good transition point for us now to talk about a little game we're playing this preseason, just 3 up, 3 down. So we kind of fill in a list here in our Google Doc and select the 3 players that impress us the most after watching the most recent match. Talk about the 3 players that maybe are struggling or going to, not necessarily find themselves in the favor of Frank and Jody and everyone else because they're just maybe not impressing as much. So, Nick, I'm going to throw it to you first, and I'm going to let you take the honors of getting a chance to share with us your 3, and then we can kind of compare and contrast across the rest of the group here and see where we line up and where we're maybe there's some disagreement.
Sure. Yeah. I thought Mason was outstanding yesterday, and I had some, serious doubts whether he could, make the jump from the championship up to a top-tier Premier League side. I know it's St. Patrick's. I know the level of competition yesterday was probably more of a League One and or lower side. So, I'm taking all that into account. But I thought he was fantastic. His movement was great. His effort was great. Set pieces were great. I think you're starting to see a guy without Ruben Loftus-Cheek for most of the season who could really step up. And, he will face much bigger obstacles than what he faced today, but thought he was wonderful. Next one on my list is Luiz. I think he is poised for a big season. I love his leadership. I know that he makes the occasional mistake, but I think he's due for a big season. I think he's being overlooked right now with Rudiger and Zuma and Christensen and Tomori and all these guys. I think he's still a locked-in starter for me and a guy that really impressed me. And then Giroud with a brace. I mean, for all the talk, and I'm really impressed with what I saw from Tammy and Batshuayi in the first half in terms of movement and almost having the ability to score. Giroud ended up getting a brace and looked every bit as serious about playing for Chelsea as he did in the Europa League final. So those are my 3. I know there are a lot of notable characters here, Dan, but I'm pretty confident in Giroud's ability.
Yeah, so we'll go to Joe because his list is absolutely opposite off of yours, and
And wrong
would be the best way to contrast it. And yeah, I think it's a good. I don't know if it's wrong, Mike. I think that's unfair. This is completely a subjective exercise.
Yeah, so I've gone with Batsman, Gilmour and Tomori. I think probably Batshuayi is the one to focus on because I've been impressed with Gilmour and Tomori, but I think he's showing signs now of someone who wants to sort of be the number 1 striker, and I certainly sort of take the point. I think Giroud was exceptional in the second half yesterday, and I think he looks again like probably the person that will start against Manchester United. But Batshuayi, in terms of his sort of work rate, his desire, I kind of like the greediness that he has in front of goal. I think last season having someone, I should say, that's willing to just shoot on sight, in the penalty area, is a massive upgrade to kind of what we saw with, what's his name, Higuain, and I think Giroud at times was more of kind of a foil for Eden Hazard than a kind of a leading number 9. So it would be nice to see someone with that mentality playing up front. I think Batshuayi, if he starts the majority of games, I think he'll get over 20 goals in all competitions for Chelsea next season. Just think that this is kind of the moment. He seems to have matured a little bit from all kind of the loans that he's been on now. He seems to have come back a little bit more of a, I don't want to say sensible player, but a little bit more of a mature player as well. And the other 2, as I mentioned, obviously been very impressed with Billy Gilmour in sort of his cameos that he's shown. And the last one really is Fikayo Tomori. I think, the trust that he's built up with Lampard and Morris from his time at Derby is sort of carried over in terms of his confidence in a Chelsea shirt. I think that he has a particularly high ceiling. I love the fact that he is very eerily reminiscent of William Gallas in terms of his style. And if he gets to being, 50% of what Gallas was as a player, he'll be a Chelsea centre-back for the next 10 years. So I'm very interested to see sort of Tomori's growth under Lampard over sort of the next, couple of seasons. But yeah, I think for me, just reiterating, I think Batshuayi is the one that I've been impressed with. Just his work rate, his effort, his willingness to shoot, just his overall kind of, I think, performances have been very positive, because I think we probably all agree that coming into this season, the lack of goals or the lack of obvious goals has been one of the biggest concerns. And I think hopefully Batshuayi can alleviate some of what we've lost with Eden Hazard going.
Now that makes a ton of sense, and I think so. We've heard a couple names now. Gilmore's, Mount. I know that those two are also on your list, Mike. But you were there with Nick, and you were also there throwing some love for the French forehead.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that Joe has to say about Batshuayi, with the exception of his inability to finish, and that scares me. And I think that as a person and as a player, he brings an excitement, and he has a personality, and he's hungry. But for a team, we had so many times last year where we hit the post or we were unable to finish. So I do think he adds some ability to smash the ball into the net, where at times we were looking to pass. I felt like he should have had a couple goals. It's
should have had a hat trick yesterday.
I would agree. Yeah, I mean, it's not going to get any easier than against St. Patrick's. So I would love to see from a confidence point of view. I mean, I thought he was very, very unlucky that shot that he basically it bounced once and he kind of hit it with the outside of his right toe, and the keeper just somehow got his hands on it. But overall, I expect. I put Giroud on my list because Giroud did what Bats could not do, and that's finish, and that's what we need up top. So I'm praying that Batshuayi will pay off, but I'm very concerned that this is just the typical preseason hype.
And Dan, in case you're keeping score, even St. Patrick's goalkeeper will stand on their head against Chelsea, and that streak continues. So unbelievable stuff, really.
You can always count on that effect. It's we are absolutely the catalyst for inspiring goalkeepers to play just out of their mind. So Seb, look, you also had Gilmore in there. You had Mount. You had Michy. Any of those in particular you want to wax a little bit more poetic about?
No, but I'm going to join Joe because Batshuayi as a shoot-on-side striker is always good to have up top, because Chelsea always had a good season when striker didn't think twice about shooting a goal. Maybe Mount, because I fell in love with football with Frank Lampard, of course, and he's the closest that reminds of Lampard, because he can run, he can score, he can get in the box, he can pass, he can. He's never the burden for his team, because he's going to work hard off the ball. He's going to be versatile as well. So maybe he's maybe a throwback to young Frank Lampard. So it's going to be really good to see Mason Mount this season.
Whoa.
Yeah, co-sign on that. I think the Mount train and the Mount bandwagon is loading up right now. Yeah. And, though there'll be seats on it until the start of the season, and then at that point you can't claim that you were there at the at the ground floor of it. All right, so that kind of gives us ours, and just for those keeping track at home, I had Michy, Mount, and Gilmore in mine as well. I think Michy looks super hungry, and I'm excited for him to link up with Pulisic again, because little familiarity there, and opportunity for Michy to hopefully feast in the Premier League this season. So now we have some downs, some people who disappointed us maybe, or we were less than thrilled, Nick, in what they had to offer on the pitch. And I know you prefaced maybe a few who maybe didn't disappointed you. What's the word? What's the word to describe how you feel?
Yeah, I don't think down necessarily means like disappointed. I just mean for me, if we're keeping track of these things like stocks, they just didn't impress me. Right? It's not something that I would buy right now. So first on my list is Bakayoko for the second week in a row here, or second match review in a row. I just don't see it. And if it's best, like Joe said, to amicably part ways, I really thought coming into this preseason that he would have the opportunity and the hunger to impress everybody. And yikes, man! I think he got outshined by Billy Gilmore and Mason Mount pretty easily in this exercise. I know they don't play the exact same position as each other, but if you're only going to take 6 or 7 midfielders, Bakayoko does not look like he's going to be one of them, and neither will one Daniel Drinkwater. So you kind of count those out right now. Next up, I personally haven't seen enough from Zuma, and I know that Joe has inspired me to maybe think about this a little differently, but in this game, I didn't think he was necessarily special by any means. So I might be being a little harsh there. That's fine. You can at me at Nick Verlaney. And then the third one is probably a carryover from last year, but I just don't see the Alonso at left back experiment working under Frank. So compared to what I saw from Emerson, I just don't think there's that natural fluidity and certainly the athleticism that's needed. So those are my 3. Just not impressed.
Well, again, they are probably crying themselves to sleep after they hear this.
Correct.
That Nick Verlaney has not rated them for a potentially second straight match. We'll have to send him a care package. So Mike, you went with a little bit of a different approach. You, again, took this as an opportunity to be creative, and we'll let the audience determine how successful they think you are in that approach.
As always, I think my number one down or disappointment is Reece James needing surgery. I think we would have all loved to see him tearing it up on this preseason tour. And unfortunately, with Willian being injured and Conte's knee still having problems, we are dealing with some injuries that will definitely impact a season in which we don't have a transfer window. So that just sucks. I would agree with the Bakayoko. Not much to be said unless basically he played like a man who was walking out the door. So and then
he did a lot of walking, Mike. There was a lot of walking involved. So.
Yeah, my last one is Christensen, and not because he's necessarily played poorly, but I think that he's kind of on the losing end of, a resurgent Zuma and potentially Tomori, and, you've got Luiz and, and Rudiger coming back. I just feel like he's falling down on the depth chart, and I know that will hurt Dan a little bit inside, but I think it's just unfortunate. So hopefully he has some massive breakouts and can, pick it up from here.
I guess it's a good point too. Is that we talked a little bit in the initial episode talking about how there's a depth chart, right, for most positions, and with Joe kind of putting the flag in the ground with Zuma being the top one there. Someone's going to have to be at the bottom, and Christensen does not look like his stock is rising at this point in the moment. I don't think you would agree with that. I think you would agree with that, Joe.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I think the more that I've watched Christensen at Chelsea, and I think it's become apparent that he is very much a confidence player. But I think also as well that season that he had being sort of the central back in a back three, I think that maybe that's his ideal position going forward. There's always been a little bit of a question about his physicality as a centre back, and for all the people that want to talk about it, it's like that's some sort of big Brexit opinion that people in the Premier League have to be a bit physical. It's the nature of the position. You even look at what Guardiola's done at City. He's not playing a 5'5" Javier Mascherano at centre back. He's got Aymeric Laporte, a tank, and he's gone out and bought massive centre halves, and he plays big centre back. So. It's a kind of a nature or sort of a fact of the position that you have to have some physicality about you. And I think in the 2, even though he did end the season sort of better than what we've seen, I think I'm less sort of I suppose I've bought into him less as a guy in the 2 than I have in the 3. So I would agree that he's potentially sliding down the kind of chart. And I think again, with Zuma coming back, and even maybe Tomori's athleticism, I think that is something that can't be overlooked, is just how athletic Tomori is as a player. That recovery speed, that aggression, that physical presence that he has may also have kind of bumped him above Christensen in the minds of Lampard and Morris, because Tomori has been partnering or did partner David Luiz, who I would expect also to be one of the starters as well. So interesting to see what happens with Christensen. I think, again, to the right team, I think he's got a lot of resale value, and I think he's got a lot of value as a player. You just question whether, at the moment, playing week in, week out as a 2 or as part of a 2 in the Premier League, does he have the physical tools? Does he have that physical presence to be a sort of dominant defender? Because, he's in sort of that kind of classy sort of sweeper mould, but when I compare him to someone like Ricardo Carvalho was a lot bigger, a lot more physical, a lot more aggressive. So, it's whether he's, I don't want to say the word too nice, but that in that kind of ballpark of where he's going to sort of fit into the sort of Chelsea hierarchy.
Well, that gives us, what's interesting though is even out of that, he did not land on your 3 maybe stock down watches here.
Nope.
So you went a little bit of a different route. I think the more traditional names people might expect after the 2 performances that some of these players have put in.
Yeah, I mean, I went with Drink Water.
Like Skywalker?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. He's nowhere near Luke Skywalker, Drinkwater. So Danny Drinkwater, Bakayoko and Alonso. I saw a photo of Drinkwater. I don't know if it was the ground or training that he left. He wasn't injured. I just think that his time is done at Chelsea, and it's quite nice actually for sort of millennial Chelsea fans that have grown up with Chelsea being a great team. They've kind of got their own sort of Winston Bogart now with Danny Drinkwater. Someone who's not playing at all in the squad, someone who seems to be surplus to requirements, who is on a very, very significant contract, and it seems like it's impossible to move him on at the moment. So it'd be interesting to see where he goes. I don't think necessarily it's on him as a player. I think he's useful. I think he would have been potentially useful at times last season, but it feels like now that the direction the club's going in, maybe sort of using some of these, let's say, second string positions in terms of sort of the depth chart with younger players that Drinkwater is surplus to requirements. Bakayoko, I think we've already touched upon it. I think his head has been out the door for some time at Chelsea, and I think the sooner that situation is resolved for all parties, the better. And I agree on the Alonso comments as well. I've never been a huge fan of him as a traditional left back. I don't think that he has the mobility to really sort of make that position his own. And as we're seeing now already with Lampard's use of fullbacks, he expects them to be quite box to box in terms of how they play. And one of the most infuriating things about Alonso that I think we've spoken about often on this podcast at least is sometimes when Chelsea lose the ball in transition, you just see him walking back. He's getting overtaken by Pedro, Williams running past him. Everyone in midfield's running past him as he sort of ambles back to his position. So I don't think that necessarily is going to fly, and it'll be interesting to see actually as the summer progresses. There was obviously interest in him from Spain. Whether Chelsea are confident in terms of Palmieri as being the number 1 and maybe having Azpilicueta as the number 2, that they could probably get a fairly decent fee for Alonso and get him off the books. But he did just sign that big contract. He's on a very big wage. I doubt he's going to see that sort of money again in his career. So it's another one of those that maybe Chelsea have kind of really handicapped themselves with the contract that they've given to Alonso. Same with Drinkwater in terms of trying to offload him. Maybe the same with Bakayoko as well. But it'd be interesting to see where he eventually ends up, because I can't see him being first choice in Lampard's system. I mean, Lampard played with one of the best left backs that's ever played in world football in terms of Ashley Cole. So I imagine his sort of benchmark for what he wants as a fullback is pretty high, and I don't think Alonso even gets near that. So for me, again, another player who potentially benefits from a move as well as Chelsea.
All right. Well, I think those are strong words. We will pass along those notes to as many people as we can at the bridge to try to make some of that action happen. Even though people have tried, maybe this will be the moment that pushes it over the edge. So there are some similarities here to the other list in yours, Seb, at least with Bakayoko, but you had 2 others that were not on anybody else's list, and very interested to hear your comments about those 2.
Yeah, so it's not a surprise, but I put Jorginho because I think...
Yes, come on.
No, but he's a fairly decent player, but so far under Frank Lampard, he has only featured for one half of football, but maybe one of the reasons Lampard went with the diamond was that it's the only position Jorginho can play. So maybe I'm ready to change my mind if Lampard's playing in a 2 in the next games in preseason. Maybe he can work out in a 2, but I'm not so sure he's going to be much better than he was at Napoli, when he was playing in the 2. That's why he was playing in the 3 at the base of midfield after that. So, of course, it was a first preseason outing, so let's not judge him on that. But I just want to know if Lampard doesn't see him as a fit midfielder for a midfield 2. If he does, I think he's going to be all right. He can run, he can pass, he can tackle, he can do a lot of things. Maybe nothing great or standing out, but he's a decent player overall. But if Lampard doesn't see him as a player capable to play in the 2, it's going to be a big concern, and I don't think he's going to have a big future at Chelsea if Lampard can't fit him in the 2. And the last one is Zappa Costa, because it's really weird to see Chelsea relying on players. We know it's the business model of Chelsea to loan players out, and but we have to question the fact that they spent 25 million on a player who is good at running up and down, but who's gotten a decent early cross, but is not offering a lot. And maybe in the future, for sure, Chelsea is going to look inside the club for players to be part of the rotation, because it's always hard, because you can't have players who are not ready to play first team football to sit on the bench for a whole season. But if you think of someone like Reece James, maybe at one point he's going to be considered as the next Chelsea fullback, or at least as a backup, maybe like when Bridge was a decade ago. But at one point, Chelsea won't be able to keep spending a lot of money on backups, and we'll have to consider players at the club, especially coming through the academy, and more importantly, find the right balance between having enough good starters and filling the gaps with academy players. Because if you play only academy players or too much at a time, it's detrimental for the team and for the players themselves. So yeah, he didn't have a great performance. He gave the ball away deeply a couple of times. So the less we see him, the better, because I think, like Alonso, is a pure wing back, and I don't think he can function well enough in a back four.
That's some good thoughts, and obviously it just makes the whole thing with Ola Aina going off on a permanent deal such a disappointment. Obviously the rise of Reece James coming in and being an exciting player that people are really looking forward to watch, even though he's still out injured at the moment, just recovering from his surgery. But there's definitely some interesting depth there that we could look to take advantage of, because I think what we saw last season is Azpilicueta's pace is a little bit suspect at this moment. And even though his one-on-one defending is still exceptionally high, which has covered him in many moments, it would be great to have a little bit more of an explosive player on the right side at some point, I would think.
Yeah.
All right. Well, my list, very similar to most: Bakayoko, Alonso, and Drinkwater. Just three individuals who at some point will probably need to find a new locker, not at Stamford Bridge, if all things go according to plan. We want to do one quick thing, though, before we kind of get out of here. And Frank today mentioned that our very own, or at least for the three of us who are the U.S. citizens, Christian Pulisic is joining up with the squad in Japan. Maybe just an opportunity for those who maybe don't watch the U.S. men's national team, or haven't followed him maybe as closely. What is maybe your kind of understanding of him, Seb, and like where are you looking forward to seeing Christian play in the coming preseason games and this coming season?
Yeah, I think Pulisic maybe is going to feature more on the right, because that's where he used to play. And if we are going to play a lot with a target man up front, we are going to have players running beyond him. So maybe as a right winger is going to be better at that. And I also think that now Hazard is gone, Willian is going to take the left wing spot, because it has always gone under the radar that Willian has been playing on the right, but initially he's a left winger as well. So I would be surprised to see Lampard going with Pulisic on the left to cut inside and shoot and score. I think the priority will go to Willian, and maybe on the right have a player who is more capable to get to the byline and put cross and Pulisic, maybe the right winger, we lacked in terms of taking on defenders, putting cross, and after that maybe Hudson-Odoi, if he's signing up, of course, maybe he can be the other right winger. But I think we are going to have Willian on the left and Pulisic on the right.
Joe, does that line up with what you think is going to happen when we actually get into the start of the season?
Yeah, I think so as well. For me, the important part is that he is willingly sort of cutting short his holiday that he's having to join the team up in. I think he'll be there in Tokyo to sort of join the team up first of all. And again, I think Lampard's comments about him are also very positive. This is a guy who, I think he's still 20, has got an exceptional amount of experience at Dortmund and also obviously with the US national team as well. I think that he will offer, we know that he's an exceptional athlete. He's come from a system that's basically made for pressing and winning the ball back high. So I think he'll have a lot of the traits that Lampard is looking for. I think that the one thing for me would be that I think for someone who is so obviously talented, I want to see the output, in terms of goals and assists now match the potential there. And yes, he's 20. He's obviously still got plenty of time to sort of work on that part of his game. But I think for somebody who's got so much experience, I would love to see him, hitting sort of 10 league goals next season, maybe 15 goals in all competitions, because he definitely has the talent, and we've seen, if you look at sort of Liverpool's front three, just how dangerous having, incredibly sort of pacey options up front is, both in terms of us countering, but also just in terms of our attack in general. So the more the kind of the sort of transfers sort of washed over me, I think the happier that I am with the deal. And I think actually, if his work ethic, which I'm sure will carry over to the Premier League, is something that's there, and then you're looking at sort of potentially Lampard and co to sort of increase his output in terms of his assists and maybe just his decision making in the final third, then he could be a super piece of business. And that right wing spot looks sort of tailor made for him to sort of come in and take over. So yeah, I think his attitude already is something that will be a huge positive for Chelsea, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he does when he meets up with the squad in Japan.
What do you think a successful output is for his first season? Like, do you have a mark that you would like to hit from a combined goals and assist total, like all comps? I
think that for me, at least, sort of in terms of like, let's say a wide forward or wide playmaker, 10 goals, 10 assists, 20 goal contributions overall. I think, although maybe, you look at his career, I mean, I'm also thinking Chelsea will play 50, 60 games, and he'll probably feature in most of them. So, 10 goals, 10 assists for someone of his talent, I don't think is hugely out of the realms of the possibilities. So, 20, let's say between 15 and 20 goal contributions, I'd be very, very happy with that.
Well, that was kind of the level that we were looking at too, Joe, because we're kind of comparing him to Willian and Pedro's outputs over the last few years, and I think if he in the league has 7 goals and 7 assists, he would kind of match or better what Willian's averages have been, because Willian's been more, I think, impactful in cup competitions than he has in the league. So I would be hopeful that he could reach a 10-10 mark, not easily, but with some room to spare, and maybe go a little bit above that. But I think where I want to caution people is that we're the 50 goal contribution Eden Hazard season or whatever, being part of 50% of our total goals is not exactly where I would put the expectation on Pulisic year one.
Well, that is a important thing to temper expectations appropriately. And I think the last thing we want to discuss, because I know Joe threw it in here before we get out of here, is some of the changes in the academy. Obviously, with Joe Edwards jumping up to join the first team coaching staff, it meant there were going to be some domino vacancies and appointments, and found out today that Andy Myers is going to be taking charge of the development team, and then Brand is going to be taking over the U18s. So, Joe, why don't you give us some of your thoughts and share a little bit of your feelings on this appointment and kind of structural change?
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm very fortunate I've been able to meet Andy Myers in a coaching capacity when he was working at Vitesse, and the general takeaway from there was that he sort of completely revolutionised their entire training programme when he went over there. Brought in a lot of stuff that you'll see in the Chelsea Academy, and actually sort of really sort of changed the way that that they went about their business. And it's quite interesting to think, we always sort of tend to see Dutch clubs as kind of the, sort of the main thing, if we're looking at sort of football development over the years. But Myers went there and really sort of had a huge impact on their day-to-day. I think from what I've been told that he's a very, very diligent coach, and I think he'll do very well with the under-23s. Ed Brand, another Chelsea Academy player who's sort of come up through the system. I think one of the interesting things that people talk about is obviously Chelsea's development of players, but we also develop a lot of decent coaches as well. Steve Clark, and Steve Holland have gone on to international stuff. Brendan Rodgers obviously has managed Celtic, Liverpool, etc. There's a lot of people that have also come through our kind of coaching carousel as well. So that's going to be interesting. The one thing for me, which I think will be very, very, let's say, I don't know, quite a significant part of the coaching is James Simmons, who's moving up, I think, from the 16s to be the assistant of the under-18s now. James Simmons was the manager or the coach of Chelsea's under-16 group, which I think probably fair to say at the club that they've not been as excited about a group that's come through the academy for a very long time. This 16s team has got some incredibly exceptional talent in, and I know James has kind of worked with them through the age groups, and a lot of these guys now will be looking at sort of getting into the FA Youth Cup side and looking to make an impact at the under-18 level. So I think there's some nice continuity with him moving up to be the assistant to Ed. Another one of these incredibly talented, forward-thinking sort of young English coaches that we're developing at the club. And hopefully, I think if the under-16s is a reflection of him as a coach, then that is a super talented and very, very bright young person who's going to be sort of helping to shape the under-18 side over the next couple of maybe years or however long it is that he's in that position for. So, again, I think it's positive for the academy that we're sort of seeing these promotions come from within, that we're not sort of going for external hires. I think Myers will be great with the development squad and the under-19s, and likewise I think Ed Brand and James Simmons will be super coaches for this really, really talented group of young players. And you've got Tino Angerin, who is for me potentially another candidate in the next few years to become part of Chelsea's midfield. Miles Pot-Harris, James Simmons is very, very high on him as well as a player. Lewis Bate in midfield. There's a number of young kids coming through now that have the potential to go on and maybe even top some of the super groups that we've seen previously, that sort of 2014-15 academy side that swept everyone before them in the UEFA Youth League. I think that they're at least the feeling within the club is that they may have a group that's as strong or stronger than that. So it's going to be really interesting to watch the under-18s next season, particularly with these coaching adjustments. And it's just another real positive for the academy that they have this ability to keep the continuity within sort of that development thread. But super well deserved, particularly for Andy Myers, who again is an ex-Chelsea player from the 90s. Really has done the graft and sort of the due diligence in terms of his coaching career. So I'm very, very happy for him. But I think overall, it's a really positive direction for Chelsea to go in. And James Simmons and maybe a little bit more so than Ed Brown. I don't want to do Ed a disservice because he's been an assistant for a long time, but I think James Simmons is a little bit more on the Joe Edwards track where he's one to keep an eye on for the future.
Oh, again, Chelsea not just making players, but making managers and coaches across from within too, which I think is the exciting thing. Is it's not always just someone that we brought in who then gets to kind of absorb Chelsea and get into the DNA. These are people who started as players or were in the academy set up themselves, so they have such a different perspective on it and a different kind of attention and desire to want to be successful and to have an understanding of what this club means from their young playing days to now their time as a coach, which I think is maybe, I guess, would you say, Joe, is that structurally different than what you've seen in the way that other clubs work in terms of their academy setup?
Yeah, I think there seems to be more of an emphasis on Chelsea's academy, at least from Neil Buff downwards, to sort of bring in kind of ex-players who have obviously shown a keenness or willingness to coach and to sort of develop themselves in that aspect. It's very interesting to see a lot of young Chelsea academy graduates who maybe don't have the professional career that maybe they would have wanted. I'm thinking about Joe Edwards in particular. It was a very good academy player, but maybe didn't have the professional career that he would have hoped. That those people sort of come back into the setup very early on. We had a football idol or pop idol equivalent ages ago. I think the guy's name was Sam Hurrell. I think he won the show, and this must have been 10, 15 years ago now. To get a contract with Chelsea's academy, and I don't think he did much in terms of his playing career. He might have played semi-pro for a bit, but even he is back at the club working as an academy coach now. So, there's a real desire to sort of keep quote-unquote Chelsea people at the club. Torre Andre Flo, Paulo Ferreira, even Hilario is now sort of obviously the first-team goalkeeping coach at a slightly more significant level. But this sort of desire to keep these people around, particularly players who've got a bit more of a link to Chelsea's past. I'm looking more sort of at Andy Myers here in the 90s, sort of understood where Chelsea have come from pre-Abramovich. I think that's also a really interesting link to sort of the past and the future as well. So, but I look at sort of Manchester City's academy, and a lot more of them just have people who are academy coaches, etc. But we seem to have a willingness to bring people in, develop with them, give them the tools, the time, the support to then go and become sort of first-rate coaches. And it's great for people like Joe Edwards, who started coaching at a really young age. I mean, there are some photos that I think Chelsea Youth was throwing around where Joe Edwards looks about 14. In terms of his face, looking after some of these academy players. So to see that sort of that continuity and that sort of camaraderie and understanding of the academy and the process in Chelsea, I think it's super important. I think it's one of the reasons why the academy is so successful, is that there's this sort of culture that they've created and sort of cultivated through the years from appointing ex-Chelsea players or people that have got a close connection with Chelsea. I think it is one of the strengths of the system, and it probably something that I would imagine is being copied elsewhere, or has been copied elsewhere since Chelsea's kind of rise to being sort of a European powerhouse.
All right, well, we are very, very excited about what the academy is going to do for the club, what the managers and coaches coming out of the academy into the first team or into the U23s or into the U18s structurally means for hopefully global football domination of all things Chelsea in the coming season. But we're going to wrap these episodes up and thank both Joe as a returning guest and Seb. Thank you so much for your inaugural appearance, and I think maybe even first podcast appearance ever.
No. I used to do a few podcasts on Philly Index at the time. I hope my English wasn't too bad, but it was a nice moment. Thanks for the invitation.
No, thank you so much for joining us, Joe. Thank you again as always. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks guys. It's been good fun as always.
All right, and Mike and Nick, it's always great talking to you.
Yeah, thanks. We're chopped liver over here. Yeah.
All right. Well, with that said and that out of the way, you know what to do, Chelsea fans. Until next time, keep the blue flag flying high.